All right, so over the weekend, we had some absolutely explosive leaked documents coming out of the Pentagon in regards to the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine that honestly could have major implications for how this war is going to be playing out in the immediate future. So, here to start us off from Axios, just a basic rundown in terms of what was in these documents, where did they come from, all that good stuff. Then we're going to get to this New York Times article, which is basically breaking down how some of the information within these leaks is giving the indication that Ukraine's air defense systems, which has basically been propping up their ability to continue to defend against the Russian invasion and prevent Vladimir Putin from using some more of his more advanced aircraft, that they are basically on their last leg and that they are running out of a lot of those key defense capabilities. So here from Axios, they say, what we know about the Pentagon document leak. So where and when did the leak occur? They say the leaked documents have appeared on various social media sites over the last week, including Twitter and Telegram. There were also reports that these were showing up on like Minecraft servers, okay, and like Discord servers as well. So these documents were basically everywhere. Now, there was a massive crackdown. They were trying to remove any traces of these. I happened to look at them directly, and some of these documents were absolutely wild. But yeah, they were basically flooded all over social media, and also they say that the New York Times was one of the first to actually report on the leak. So they say some of the documents appeared on the platform Discord in early March, while other documents dating to January appear to have been posted even earlier, though it's not clear exactly when, according to Bellingcat. Okay, so the document in question here, it is essentially outlining like some of the current status of the Ukraine war, but it's a report from back a couple months ago, so it's not like the most up-to-date status of where the war is standing like right now to this day. But again, there are some important key facts and figures that were within these leaked documents that show us where we're headed in the immediate future. So they say the documents were then spread to the anonymous message board 4chan and pro-Russian Telegram channels before making their way to Twitter and major media outlets per Bellingcat. So who's behind the leak? Okay, whoever actually ended up leaking these, honestly, like, I don't have any principled stance against leaks. I mean, we saw what happened to Julian Assange and is continuing to happen to Julian Assange, to Chelsea Manning, to Edward Snowden as well. Typically, when there's a leak like this, I'm generally in favor of releasing that information. Now, how much of this is like, actually beneficial to be in the public's interest of knowing it, I'll leave that up to you guys in terms of the actual details. Some of this is like directly sensitive information that could, genuinely lead to people being killed on the ground as this war is continuing. So it's kind of like a mixed bag in terms of like this being some sort of like a noble cause or something. And again, we have no idea who the actual original leaker it was at this point. So, we don't know what their motivation was. We don't know, what their intentions were, but they say the source of the leak remains unknown again, and determining who could be behind it will be difficult given the hundreds, if not thousands, of government and military officials have the necessary security clearances and have had access to the documents. So they say the documents appeared online as photos of crumpled up pieces of paper, and I'm going to show you one of them that the New York Times reported here in a second, laid on top of magazines and surrounded by household objects, suggesting they might have been hurriedly stuffed into a pocket and then photographed later at a secure location. Okay, so somebody apparently just lifted these documents, and it's somebody obviously with a high security clearance within the government, and they just lifted them and like took them to a personal location where they have all of these different like clues as to who this person might be. There was like a hunting magazine that was on the table. It's like, whoever this leaker was, you didn't exactly do that great of a job of covering your tracks. Now again, we don't know yet, but I would be honestly surprised if they don't find out who the actual leaker was. But they say the tranche of leaked documents number roughly 100 pages, though at least one of them appeared to have been altered from the original at a later time. Okay, so this is part of this, like, how much are we going to trust about these documents? Is this some sort of like nefarious purpose behind this, and what, who would benefit from having this type of information leaked? A lot of that is still up in the air, but again, as they point out here, it seems like once the Russians got their hands on these documents and started passing around their own versions of them, that they did make changes to the amount of Russians that were killed in action versus the amount of Ukrainians that were killed in actions, and sort of just like fudging the numbers to make it look better on the Russian side of this. So they continue saying that the alterations overshot U.S. estimates for Ukrainian casualties in the war, while again underestimating Russian casualties, prompting Ukrainian officials and Russian bloggers to each accuse the other side of an attempt at disinformation. So, I mean, yeah, this is something that we've seen throughout the entirety of the war. Obviously, Russia's going to want to, diminish the amount of their reported casualties. Ukraine is going to want to do the same for PR purposes. I mean, that's kind of just like how wars work generally. But at the same time, when you actually look at these numbers, like regardless of the range that you want to believe in, we're talking about tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians for that matter that have been killed as a part of this war. Okay, we only had like a couple thousand, U.S. troops who were killed in Afghanistan and Iraq, for example. Like this is like massive numbers of people who are actually being killed as a part of like this modern warfare that we have not seen for a long time between two industrialized nations that are going head to head with some of the most high-tech equipment on the face of the planet. That's going to be the end result of this, right? So we're going to finish off here. They say, what's in the documents? They say the content of the documents varies, but includes U.S. assessments of the war in Ukraine dating to February and March, including territorial gains and ammunition shortages, which is a key part that I'm going to focus on here. They say the documents illustrate U.S. efforts to spy on Ukraine's government and military leaders and lays out the U.S.'s extensive knowledge of Russian government intelligence. This aspect of it is not that surprising, but this aspect of it is something that I've talked about before on this channel. According to U.S. military officials, we actually know more about what the Russians are doing in this war than we do in many ways about what the Ukrainians are doing in this war. Obviously, they're trying to keep their cards close to their chest. Maybe they don't necessarily trust the United States with some of that information, probably especially not now that there was this massive leak of all of this information that just went across all of these social media platforms. So probably not going to help in that effort. But yeah, that is kind of a problem when we are, the main country that is funding and backing and supporting this country in Ukraine and defending themselves, which you can totally agree with, and that's fine. But at the same time, like, we should probably know what's actually happening on the battlefield, right? We shouldn't have to be spying on them in order to get some of that information, right? But they say the documents also outline U.S. efforts to spy on its allies, Israel and South Korea. Okay, again, that part of it is honestly just not surprising to me at all, but there were some other weird parts of this that didn't really have necessarily anything to do with Ukraine, and so they're going to get into that here. They say one of the documents, a CIA update from March 1st, sourced to Signals Intelligence, seems to show that leaders of Israel's intelligence agency encouraged Mossad officials and Israeli citizens to protest the government's proposed judicial reforms. So in other words, they're basically claiming that Mossad, the CIA equivalent within Israel, may have been egging on these massive widespread protests that I've been covering on this channel over in Israel, which is kind of interesting and I think will like warrant its own video in and of itself that I'll make later this week. But they say another report based on Signals Intelligence describes South Korea's concern. And by the way, Signals Intelligence, what this basically translates to is, again, we're spying on them, okay? We are intercepting their phone calls, their communications. That's how we're getting this information. But they say information based on the Signals Intelligence describes South Korea's concern that artillery shells requested by the U.S. to replenish its stockpiles could end up in Ukraine. So they're basically saying we don't want to directly, fund this effort with our own weapons. The United States is trying to like buy weapons on behalf of Ukraine to then give to Ukraine, and South Korea behind the scenes obviously was saying not really big fans of that. And then they get into, how have other countries reacted, but I'm just going to skip over this part. I mean, this is, pretty much exactly what you would expect. You have, again, Russians claiming that, some of the reports were lying about their KIA numbers, Ukrainians doing the same and all of that. But here's the real meat of this, okay? This is where we get into the aspects of, like, how is this going to directly impact how we understand this war, especially as Ukraine has been gearing up for a spring counter-offensive to try to retake some of their territory. So here from the New York Times, they say, leaked documents suggest Ukrainian air defense is in peril, if not reinforced. Okay, so part of this is sort of them giving the indication that, and there certainly is going to be a massive push for this from Ukraine and maybe the United States government as well, that if we do not give them much more of these air defense systems at the very least, then basically they're going to fall flat and the entire project could be in jeopardy. So they're definitely going to be using these leaked documents in an effort to try to bolster more U.S. aid, more weaponry going over to Ukraine. So they say here from the New York Times, for more than a year, Ukrainian air defenses, reinforced by Western weaponry, have kept Russian planes at bay. But without a huge influx of munitions, Ukraine's entire air defense network, weakened by repeated barrages from Russian drones and missiles, could fracture, according to U.S. officials and newly leaked Pentagon documents, potentially allowing President Vladimir Putin of Russia to unleash his lethal fighter jets in ways that could change the course of the war. So they say in the early days of the invasion, Russian aircraft flew hundreds of combat flights to bomb targets in Ukraine, but a combination of quick thinking by Ukrainian commanders and poor intelligence and bad aim time by Russian pilots left many of Ukraine's warplanes and air defenses intact, preventing Moscow from gaining control of the skies above the battlefield and forcing Russia to keep much of its air force out of the fight. And keep in mind, I mean, this is a war that, or a so-called special military operation that Vladimir Putin thought would take a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks at the max, and we are now months and months and months and months into this. And since the beginning, when Ukraine's air defense systems managed to stand up a little bit against some of those initial flights that were coming in with some of these high-tech jets, they basically pulled back some of those jets because they didn't want to sacrifice their air superiority, essentially. But now it looks like with some of the massive holes within Ukrainians' air defense systems and them running out of some of these key munitions, that could potentially change. And sorry for the massively loud alarm going off in the background there, but they continue here saying that now Pentagon officials are worried that Moscow's barrage of attacks from afar is draining Ukraine's stores of missiles it uses to defend itself, and a Pentagon assessment from late February contained in the trove of leaked documents that were discovered circulating online last week paints an even grimmer picture. Okay, so here are some of the missiles basically that they're worried about, or these defense systems that they're worried about running out of. So they say stocks of missiles for Soviet-era S-300 and Buk air defense systems, which make up 89% of Ukraine's protection against most fighter aircraft and some bombers. 89%. Okay, that's how much of their air defense system is now being depleted with some of these, again, Soviet-era weapons that they have been using. And they say they were projected to be fully depleted by May 3rd and mid-April. Okay, so again, we're coming up on these dates now. So that's again why people are starting to get a little bit worried from the Ukrainian perspective. They say the document, which was issued on February 28th, based the assessment on consumption rates at the time, and it's not clear if those rates have changed. I would be surprised if there was any significant change in that, but just to show you like a little bit of the actual document here, which I'm honestly surprised that the New York Times just posted like straight up like this. Doesn't look like they actually removed any information or anything like that, so I guess it's just good to go. But you can see here in the top left-hand corner, basically, they say again, the SA-10, the SA-11s comprise 89% of Ukraine's air defense for medium to high range, medium to high range protection, like 20,000 feet or so. And sort of the way that these air defense systems works is you have like layers of them. So like some of them will be for lower altitude, fighters like helicopters, for example. Some of them will be for more like high altitude bombers. Some of them are more geared for like ballistic defense systems. And so when you have a crack in any one of those different systems that are supposed to tackle different layers of a potential oncoming air invasion force, then you can start to have cracks in that system, and then they'll be able to use different variations to be able to go after some of the other ones. So you can't have any sort of piece of this or any segment of this operation defense-wise break down without jeopardizing the entire situation. But again, you have running out of these BUK or the Buk SA-11s, which will be again completely depleted by March 31st, 2023, which obviously we've already passed that date. And then the S-300s or the SA-10s will have been completely depleted by May 2nd, which is just in a couple weeks now. So they finish off here saying that the same document assessed that Ukrainian air defenses designed to protect troops on the front line, where much of Russia's air power is concentrated, will be completely reduced by May 23rd, resulting in strains on the air defense network deeper into Ukrainian territory. Okay. So what's the main takeaway from all of this? Well, again, first of all, whoever leaked these documents probably going to get absolutely shafted once they find out who it actually was. Now, I'll cover that when we get to that point, but just in terms of like what these documents actually show, again, there were a bunch of different pieces of this, like the Mossad angle of this, China's angle of this, and how much they are willing to back up Russia in potential future hypothetical situations, potentially even including lethal aid deliveries to Russia to continue this war. There are a bunch of different things that I'm just not going to be able to get to in this video, but just in terms of like the brass tacks of this, it's honestly not looking that great for Ukraine. Now, honestly, we are sending them different air defense systems and stuff like that, but it's basically just a numbers game at this point. Are they going to be able to keep up the defense against some of these Russian ballistic missiles, the hypothetical defense against some more high-tech aircraft that Russia could be sending as a result of these leaks, right? Are they going to be able to keep up the output that they need to in order to defend their territory, or are these new shipments of air defense systems coming from NATO, coming from the United States? Is that going to be enough? Is it going to be quick enough for them to be able to replace their stockpiles, or is this going to give an opportunity to Vladimir Vladimir Putin to potentially start using some of his more advanced aircraft and, potentially drastically changing the war in the immediate future.
Everyone is saying good Politic guy has the best Politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying